My name is David, and people think that at my age I should be harmless, easy to fool, and blind to betrayal. But the night my son-in-law opened the drawer in my bedroom, what exploded in his face wasn't just glitter. It was the end of every lie he thought he could hide. He believed I was a weak old man, too slow to notice, too tired to fight back. He didn't know I had spent 30 years investigating liars for a living. He didn't know that I was watching, waiting, and recording. And he certainly didn't expect that justice in my house would sparkle. Before we begin, I want to ask you, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more powerful stories like this one. The fork froze halfway to my mouth when Charlie leaned across my dinner table and asked, "So, David, that safe upstairs, what kind of lock does it have?" His voice carried an edge that didn't belong in family conversation. For a moment I thought I'd misheard, but then I saw the way his eyes locked on mine, calculating, hungry, like a man sizing up prey. My daughter Lauren nearly choked on her water. "Charlie, what kind of question is that?" She snapped, embarrassed, but Charlie didn't back down. His smile was too smooth, too practiced. He waved a dismissive hand and said it was only curiosity, something about all the break-ins in the neighborhood. Break-ins. I had lived here for 15 years, and the only drama we'd had was Mrs. Henderson's cat stuck in a tree. Inside, I felt my chest tighten. He wasn't joking. His eyes didn't carry humor. They carried calculation. My instincts from 30 years as an insurance investigator lit up like a warning siren. I set down my fork carefully, as though the weight of the silver had suddenly doubled. He went on elbows, pressing into my table fingers, tapping a rhythm that betrayed his impatience. "A man your age living alone in a house this size. You must have some serious security measures. What about insurance, for your daughter's sake? If something happened to you, she'd need to know where everything is, wouldn't she?" Lauren shifted uncomfortably beside him. "Dad's always been careful," she said quickly, trying to smooth things over. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was watching him, his pupils widening slightly, as he leaned in, his expression sharpening when he mentioned my possible death. That wasn't idle chatter. That was a predator slipping out from behind his mask. I forced a thin smile. "I have everything organized. Lauren knows what she needs to know." Then Charlie dropped the line that cut through me like glass. "But does she know about the key?" The words hung in the air. Lauren blinked, confused. "What key?" In that moment, I nearly dropped the act. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "How do you know about any key in my bedroom?" For just a heartbeat, Charlie's mask slipped. His eyes hardened into something cold and ruthless before the fake son-in-law smile returned. "Oh, I was looking for aspirin last week. Headache was killing me. Must have opened the wrong drawer by accident." Lauren nodded, remembering his supposed migraine. "I do remember that day you were in pain. But I remembered too. He had been upstairs for nearly half an hour. I had thought nothing of it at the time, but aspirin had always been in the medicine cabinet, not in my dresser drawer." Charlie kept smiling, but inside I felt the chill of realization creep through me. This wasn't idle curiosity. This was reconnaissance. "Now let me ask you, if someone at your table spoke of your death like it was an item on the menu, would you brush it off or take it as the warning it truly was?" Charlie leaned back in his chair, grinning like nothing unusual had passed his lips. He said smoothly, "I couldn't help but notice a little brass key in your drawer the other day. Kind of old-fashioned. What's it for?" My pulse thudded in my ears. He'd just admitted it openly. He'd been rummaging in my private things, bold enough to turn it into casual dinner talk. Lauren frowned, her fork resting on the edge of her plate. "What key?" she asked again, this time more suspiciously. I kept my tone steady, but my eyes stayed locked on Charlie. "That's curious," I said slowly, "because I don't remember ever leaving a key lying out." For just a flash, barely long enough for Lauren to catch, Charlie's expression tightened. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed, and I saw the raw calculation hiding under his charm. Then it was gone, replaced by the concerned son-in-law routine. Like I said, wrong drawer. I wasn't snooping. I just grabbed the first one I saw while looking for aspirin. But I knew better. Years of investigative work had taught me how to read micro-expressions, the little leaks of truth people can't plug, no matter how good the act. And what I saw on Charlie's face was not embarrassment, it was strategy. I wanted to slam my fist on the table to shout at him for daring to violate my space. But instead, I picked up my glass of water, sipping as though I hadn't just been handed a declaration of war. If Charlie thought I was a doddering old fool who left valuables out for the taking, he was going to learn a lesson he'd never forget. The rest of the meal played out in strained silence. Lauren tried to make small talk about her book club, about the library downtown, but her words hung in the air like paper lanterns no one cared to light. Charlie, meanwhile, kept circling back with his questions. How much cash did I keep on hand? Did I ever travel overnight? Did I trust the local police to respond quickly in an emergency? Each question was wrapped in the silk of casual curiosity, but underneath I could hear the grinding gears of a plan forming. After dinner, Lauren rose to clear the plates. "Dad, you cooked. Let me handle the cleanup tonight." But Charlie placed his hand on her shoulder, his eyes flicking back to me. "Come on, honey. Let your dad have his routine. We should get some rest." His voice was warm, but his grip was firm, leading her upstairs. I stood at the sink, my hands moving automatically through soap and water, but my mind was cataloging every detail. 30 minutes later, the kitchen gleamed, but the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt invaded, exposed, as though every corner carried Charlie's fingerprints. I looked toward the staircase, listening to the muffled sounds of their voices drifting from the guest room. And a thought settled into me like cold iron: this wasn't over. "So let me ask you, if you discovered your son-in-law had gone through your bedroom drawers, would you confront him head-on? Or would you wait, watch, and prepare your move?" That night, I couldn't shake the image of Charlie's smirk when he mentioned the key. It wasn't the kind of grin you forget, it was the grin of a man who thought he'd already won. I climbed the stairs, slowly pausing at the top step. My bedroom door, which I always kept shut, was cracked open 2 inches. The sliver of darkness between the frame and the door hit me harder than a fist. I knew I'd closed it before dinner. My hand gripped the banister as I stood listening. The house was silent save for the settling groans of old wood. I nudged the door open, every nerve in my body taut. Inside, everything looked perfectly in place. Bed neatly made, lamp angled just right, reading glasses resting where I had left them. But decades of habit sharpen a man's eyes. The closet door hung open 4 inches. My dresser drawers sat slightly uneven. A folder peeked out just enough to betray careless handling. I pulled the drawer fully. The files had been rifled through, papers shuffled out of order. My will, usually tucked at the back, was shoved near the front. Insurance papers mixed with bank statements. And worst of all, the little brass key that I'd taped beneath the lip of the drawer was gone. My stomach clenched, not from fear, but from the rage that comes when you realize someone has violated the sanctity of your private space. This wasn't an accident. This was a methodical search, a man hunting for treasure he believed was his for the taking. I walked to the safe tucked in the closet and bolted to the floor. The digital lock blinked obediently, waiting for my code, but I knew Charlie now had the manual override. The thought of his grubby hands one day prying into that safe made my jaw tighten. I closed the closet carefully, leaving everything as I had found it. If Charlie believed I hadn't noticed, that would give me the advantage. Later, lying in bed, I forced myself to keep my breathing steady. Around 11:47, I heard movement downstairs, soft but deliberate. Then his voice drifting up through the heating vent. "Yeah, it's me. Everyone's asleep. The old man's definitely loaded." My blood ran cold. He wasn't working alone. I fumbled for my phone and hit record. His voice came clearer. Talk of bank statements, jewelry, cash debts owed to men who weren't patient. And then the line that burned into me tomorrow night. When Lauren's at book club, we'll have perfect timing. I clenched the phone so hard my knuckles ached. My son-in-law wasn't just greedy. He was desperate, drowning in gambling debt, willing to drag my daughter into the storm. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind a cyclone of plans. If Charlie thought I was a frail old man who wouldn't notice he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Now tell me, if you heard your son-in-law plotting your robbery through the walls of your own home, would you call the police immediately? Or would you wait to catch him red-handed? The morning sun filtered through my curtains, but I felt no warmth. My body was stiff from a sleepless night, my mind still replaying every word of Charlie's midnight phone call. He'd said it so casually. The old man's loaded tomorrow night is perfect. He didn't just underestimate me, he dismissed me like a footnote in his story. That sting cut deeper than his plan to rob me. I shuffled into the kitchen, forcing my hands to move in rhythm with routine grind, the coffee beans, crack, 2 eggs, slide bread into the toaster. Normalcy was a shield, and I wore it well. When Lauren came down, her hair still tousled, she smiled at me the way she did when she was a little girl. "Morning, Dad." Her gratitude was genuine, her trust unshaken. And then Charlie entered calm, rested, wearing the smugness of a man who believed everything was falling into place. "Beautiful morning," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "What's everyone got planned for today?" I set his cup of coffee in front of him, careful to keep my hand steady. "Oh, the usual," I answered. "Might run some errands later. Hardware store, maybe the bank." The twitch in his left eye betrayed him. He leaned forward. "Everything okay financially?" His tone was smooth, but I could feel the hook in his question. Lauren laughed lightly, patting his arm. "Dad just likes to double-check things in person. Old habits." "Not paranoia," I corrected gently. "Careful." Charlie nodded a bit too eagerly. "Absolutely. Can't be too careful these days, especially at your age. Identity theft scams, it's a jungle out there." His grin widened as though he'd delivered a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was a dig wrapped in false concern. And then he tested another angle. "Speaking of careful, you mentioned being a heavy sleeper. That's good, right? Means you're getting proper rest." I hadn't mentioned any such thing, but I nodded anyway, playing along. "Once I'm out, I'm gone till morning. Sometimes I even take something to help me sleep deeper." His posture relaxed noticeably. "That's great," he said. "You need your rest." He thought he had me, thought I'd hand him the blueprint to rob me blind. But what he didn't know was that every word was bait I fed him, every nod a leash I wrapped tighter around his neck. I carried the plates to the sink, humming softly, like nothing troubled me. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught him glance toward the stairs, toward my bedroom, toward what he thought was his prize. He was mapping his crime scene blind to the fact that I was mapping his downfall. That morning, while he made calls about his so-called job prospects, and Lauren busied herself with organizing boxes I planned. My errands would not just be errands. They would be the first stones in the trap I was about to build. So let me ask you, if you were in my shoes, Would you keep feeding a predator false confidence, or would you strike right then and there? I left the house late that morning with my car keys warm in my palm, but it wasn't errands I was thinking about. It was survival. The hardware store clerk probably thought I was just another old man tinkering with projects, but every item in my basket had a purpose. A small confetti cannon from the party aisle, a bag of glitter so fine it would stick to skin for weeks, and a few odds and ends I could pass off as home repairs. When I returned, Lauren and Charlie were in the living room, half watching television. Lauren greeted me with her usual warmth, but Charlie's eyes flicked to the shopping bag in my hand, then back to his phone. He was always watching, always calculating. I climbed the stairs, closing my bedroom door softly behind me. In my dresser drawer where he thought my precious key waited, I installed my first layer of defense. The confetti cannon came apart easily in my hands. I'd seen hundreds of similar devices over the years: party tricks, insurance claims gone wrong, accidents people swore were intentional. But now in my hands, it became something different. A trap. I poured in the glitter silver and gold enough to coat a man's hair, face, and clothing in an unmistakable mark of guilt. Then I adjusted the mechanism so it would trigger only when someone reached deep right, where I used to tape the real key. Finally, I placed an old luggage key near the front bait to tempt greedy fingers. Testing it took patience. I used a wooden spoon, sliding it into the drawer as if searching. With a sudden crack, the cannon burst, spraying glitter across my room. The air shimmered with flecks of gold and silver, and I couldn't help but chuckle. "Perfect," I muttered, brushing the sparkles from my sleeve. But a trap alone wasn't enough. I needed proof, undeniable proof, that even Lauren couldn't deny. That afternoon, I stopped at the electronics store. The clerk, a young man named Marcus, showed me a compact wireless camera that streamed directly to my phone. It was small enough to hide among my books, sharp enough to capture every expression in high definition. Back home, I tucked it between two hardcovers on my nightstand, angled just right to record the dresser and anyone standing before it. I tested it on my phone. The picture was crystal clear, even in night vision. I could almost see Charlie's smirk reflected in the test image, his downfall already waiting. By dinner, everything was set. The trap was armed. The camera was live. I carried myself like a man ready for bed early, rubbing my temples, moving a little slower than usual. Long day, I sighed, and Charlie's eyes lit up like a gambler spotting a loaded deck. That night, I lay in bed with the phone beside me, its screen showing my empty room in eerie green light. I kept my breathing steady, rehearsing the performance of deep sleep. And in the silence of that waiting, I realized something. This wasn't just about my money anymore. It was about my daughter, about showing her the truth. So tell me, if you had the chance to catch a betrayer red-handed with both proof and humiliation, would you take it, or would you quietly protect your peace? I woke the next morning at 6:30 sharp, same as always. The recording of Charlie's phone call still sat safely on my device, his voice clear as day, the old man's loaded, "Tomorrow night," perfect timing. Hearing it again over coffee confirmed what I already knew. My son-in-law thought I was prey. But I wasn't going to hand him over to the police yet. Not when I had the chance to expose him in a way he'd never forget. At breakfast, I kept my face neutral, even cheerful. Lauren poured orange juice, humming softly, still oblivious to the storm brewing under her roof. Charlie swaggered in 10 minutes later, hair damp from the shower, a man who believed he owned the board before the game even started. "Morning, David," he said easily. "Sleep well?" I smiled, stirring sugar into my coffee. "Like a rock. Didn't wake once all night." The lie slipped from my lips, as smooth as honey. He wanted me sedated, unconscious, vulnerable. Fine. I'd give him the performance of a lifetime. You know, he added, sitting down, I was thinking maybe we should update your security. Cameras, motion lights, that kind of thing. You never know what could happen in a place like this. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. You might be right, I said, then leaned forward just slightly. But some things are better handled the old-fashioned way. Locks, keys, routines. They've always worked for me. For just a flicker, his eyes narrowed. He wanted me to depend on technology he could sabotage, not the habits he hadn't yet cracked. After breakfast, I rinsed my plate and wiped the counter, keeping my movements easy measured. Think I'll run a few errands today, I announced casually. Need a couple things from the hardware store. Charlie nodded absently, though his eyes stayed sharp. He thought he knew my patterns, thought he had every weakness memorized. He didn't realize I was changing the rules mid-game. In the hardware store, I walked past rows of hammers and nails until I found myself in the party supply aisle. The irony made me chuckle under my breath. A confetti cannon, a bag of glitter. Charlie wanted to strip me bare and humiliate me. He was about to learn that humiliation cuts both ways. By the time I returned home, my plan had shifted from mere defense to something sharper. Not only would I keep him from stealing what was mine, I'd mark him, record him, and leave no room for excuses when Lauren saw the truth. That afternoon, while they were distracted with groceries and small talk, I slipped upstairs to test the setup again. Drawer closed. Camera angled perfectly. Phone feed showing my room in high-definition clarity. If Charlie wanted to treat me like a gullible old man, I would let him write until the moment his world exploded in silver and gold. Now tell me, would you have gone to the police right away? Or would you have let the predator walk willingly into your trap? Charlie was clever in the way most desperate men are. He asked the same questions twice, only in different wrappers, hoping I'd trip over my own answers. That evening, as we sat in the living room, he leaned back on the couch, swirling a glass of soda like it was whiskey. You've always been such a sound sleeper, haven't you, David? I feigned a chuckle. Oh, yes. Once I'm down, I'm gone. That's age for you. I sometimes take something to help knocks me out good and solid. The satisfaction that flickered across his face told me everything I needed to know. He thought my defenses were paper thin. He thought tonight or tomorrow he'd waltz into my room and find the key exactly where he'd seen it. But he wasn't aware of what I'd done that morning, moving the real key into a junk drawer in the kitchen, buried beneath rubber bands and twist ties. My bedroom looked exactly the way he expected, but the treasure he wanted no longer existed there. What remained was bait. I sat in my chair, pretending to doze while Lauren read from her book beside me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Charlie watching me more than the television, studying my breathing, my posture, every detail of the act. It was almost insulting. Did he really think 30 years of watching fraudsters lie hadn't taught me how to play possum? Later, when Lauren headed upstairs, Charlie lingered. He stood by the fireplace, tracing his finger along the mantel like a man trying to look casual. David, you sure you're okay tonight? You seem tired after dinner. I rubbed my temples, putting on my best show. It's this blood pressure medicine. Doctor says it wears me out. By the time I'm in bed, I don't hear a thing until morning. He smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. That's good. You need your rest. When I climbed the stairs, I exaggerated every step. I paused halfway up as though catching my breath, then gripped the railing like I needed it for balance. He was watching me from the bottom of the stairs, and I wanted him to believe the story I was selling, a tired old man slipping. But once I shut my bedroom door, the performance ended. I checked the camera again. The feed showed my dresser in perfect clarity. I ran my finger along the drawer where the trap sat, waiting a silent promise of the spectacle to come. It wasn't just about catching him, it was about teaching him. A man who thought he could manipulate my daughter's love, exploit her trust, and reduce me to a stereotype, was about to find out that some old men bite back harder than he could imagine. So let me ask you, if someone underestimated you to the point of planning your downfall, would you play weak to draw them in or strike early to remind them of your strength? The next morning started the same as always: eggs, toast, coffee. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. Charlie thought he had me figured out, thought my patterns were his roadmap to riches. He didn't know every move I made now was deliberate, each step placed to make him feel safer, bolder, more certain that the perfect crime was within reach. Over breakfast, he returned to his favorite subject, cloaked in casual conversation. "You ever keep cash around, David? You know, just in case banks go down or there's an emergency." Lauren shot him a look, irritated. "Charlie, Dad doesn't need to explain his finances to you." But I smiled faintly, stirring sugar into my coffee. "I keep what I need," I said evenly. "Nothing more, nothing less." He nodded, masking disappointment. His hands drummed on the table. He wanted specifics, a number, a detail he could plan around. Instead, I gave him vagueness, the kind that frustrates schemers and makes them sloppy. After the dishes were cleared, I announced my next errand. "Might stop by the bank later, make sure things are in order." Lauren shrugged, but Charlie stiffened eyes, flicking toward me like a dog hearing its name. He hid it quickly, leaning back in his chair. "Smart idea," he said too quickly. "A man your age should always double-check. You never know." A man your age. There it was again, the subtle sting, the dismissal wrapped in advice. He thought he was reminding me of my fragility. But what he didn't understand was that every time he used my age as a weapon, he gave me another reason to sharpen mine. By mid-morning, he was pacing the living room, pretending to make job search calls. I recognized the tone in his voice, fast, hushed, desperate. The same rhythm I'd heard through the vent 2 nights before when he promised someone that the payday was coming soon. His words were different now, but his urgency gave him away. I slipped out quietly, heading not just to the bank, but also to the electronics store again. The clerk remembered me. "Camera working out?" he asked cheerfully. "Perfect," I replied, adding 2 more units to my purchase. One for the hallway outside my room, one for the stairwell. If Charlie thought he could sneak by unseen, he was about to discover that even shadows have eyes. Back home, I set them up quickly, while Lauren napped and Charlie busied himself in the garage. The feeds streamed straight to my phone, overlapping angles like a spider's web. Any move he made after dark would be captured from 3 perspectives. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone screen glowed beside me, showing 3 silent, watchful images of my home. Charlie wanted me blind and asleep. Instead, I was wide awake with a front-row seat to his downfall. So let me ask you, if you had a chance to see betrayal coming from every angle, would you confront it head-on, or would you let the evidence stack until the betrayer trapped himself? The house at night had always been my sanctuary. The creak of floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint rustle of trees outside, these were the sounds that told me I was home safe. But now every sound felt different. Every whisper of the house made me wonder if Charlie was practicing his midnight stroll, testing the silence the way a burglar maps an alarm system. I lay in bed, the glow of my phone casting shadows on the ceiling. 3 camera feeds showed me slices of my house, the hallway, the stairwell, my bedroom dresser. It was eerie watching my own home through the eyes of a machine, but it gave me a quiet confidence. If Charlie moved, I would know. If he tried, the world would see. Around 11:00 p.m., I heard his voice drifting up faintly from the living room. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was sharp, clipped, impatient. Another call to the man holding his debts, no doubt. I imagined Charlie pacing, sweating, promising he was days away from solving everything. What he didn't realize was that every promise he made brought him closer to destruction. Lauren came upstairs not long after, kissed my cheek, and wished me good night. She looked tired, worn by the weight of her husband's failures, but still unwilling to see them clearly. That innocence, that stubborn faith in him, made my stomach ache. She deserved better. She deserved the truth. When the house grew quiet again, I slipped from bed and checked the dresser one last time. The drawer sat closed, the dummy key glinting just faintly in the dark. I ran a finger along the wood, knowing that when his hand reached in the explosion of glitter would be unstoppable. It wasn't just a trap, it was a stage for his lies to crumble. I climbed back into bed, adjusting the phone on my nightstand so I could see all 3 feeds at once. The rooms were still shadows, stretching like guards on patrol. I slowed my breathing, settling into the role I'd chosen, the helpless old man, asleep and defenseless. My job tonight wasn't to fight, it was to act. Hours passed, midnight, 1, 2. Every creak set my nerves alight, but the cameras stayed quiet, recording only the emptiness of a sleeping house. I thought briefly about the life I had before all this: quiet evenings, morning, coffee visits from Lauren that brought laughter instead of dread. Charlie had poisoned that peace, but he was about to learn that peace isn't something you steal. It's something you fight to protect. At 2:40 a.m., the first movement registered. A shadow in the stairwell camera. Slow, careful, deliberate. My pulse quickened, but my body stayed still. On the screen, Charlie appeared, dressed in dark clothes, moving like he'd rehearsed every step. The predator thought the house was his playground. He didn't know he was already caught in the web. Now tell me, if you knew the betrayer was only feet away from springing your trap, would you stay still and silent, or would you confront him before the curtain rose? At 2:43 a.m., the camera feed showed him clearly, Charlie creeping across the hallway like he owned it. He moved with the confidence of a man who thought he'd studied every weakness, every creak of the floorboards, every habit of his mark. But confidence can blind a man faster than fear. Through the crack of my bedroom door, I could see his shadow slip inside. He paused at the threshold, holding his breath, waiting. My breathing stayed steady, heavy with the rhythm of a man knocked out cold. Satisfied, he stepped closer. The phone in my hand buzzed lightly with motion alerts, capturing every second from 3 angles. Charlie went straight for the dresser. He didn't waste time looking elsewhere, didn't bother with stealth now. He'd already convinced himself I was unconscious, already pictured himself pocketing the key and moving to the safe. He pulled the drawer open with a soft scrape. His body tensed in anticipation as his fingers reached for the little brass key waiting near the front. And then boom. The confetti cannon fired with the force of a firecracker, a sharp burst echoing through the room. A cloud of silver and gold glitter erupted, coating his hair, his face, his clothes. He staggered back with a gasp, clawing at his shirt as flecks of glitter rained around him like judgment. He looked less like a thief and more like some bizarre party decoration gone wrong. I bolted upright in bed, with feigned confusion flicking on my lamp. What in God's name? I shouted, my voice trembling just enough to sell the act. Charlie froze, eyes wide, his face glowing with flecks of metallic light. He looked at me, then at his hands, as if searching for an excuse buried in the glitter. I heard a noise, he stammered. Thought someone might be breaking in. Breaking in my dresser, I asked, letting my voice sharpen. His mouth opened, then closed. From down the hall came the thud of footsteps, Lauren's voice, worried, calling Dad. What happened? Panic flashed across his face. He brushed at the glitter furiously, but the more he tried to wipe it away, the worse it clung, shimmering under the lamplight. He was a thief, painted by his own crime, no excuse strong enough to hide the evidence. Lauren appeared at the door, robe tied hastily. She froze at the sight, me sitting up in bed, bewildered Charlie standing by my dresser, dripping in glitter like a disgraced ornament. "Charlie, what are you doing?" she whispered. He sputtered, reaching for her, but glitter cascaded from his sleeve like snow. "It's not what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like, and my camera was still rolling, capturing every second of his humiliation. The trap had sprung. The only thing left now was the reckoning. So let me ask you, if you caught a betrayer shining in evidence, would you expose him immediately, or would you wait and let him dig himself deeper in front of everyone? Lauren stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes darting between me and Charlie. The glitter caught the lamplight, making him sparkle like some grotesque decoration. His mouth opened, but no explanation could cover the truth that coated him from head to toe. "Lauren," he started, his voice desperate. "I thought I heard something in your dad's room. I was just checking." "Checking," she interrupted sharply, her brows knitting. At 3 a.m, in his dresser drawer, Charlie swallowed hard, his glitter-streaked face twisting with frustration. "I thought maybe he had sleep aids, something to help him rest." "He wasn't sleeping well earlier." "Charlie," I said evenly, "my medications have been in the bathroom cabinet for 20 years. You know that." Lauren's eyes flicked to me, and for the first time I saw suspicion creep into her gaze, not toward me, but toward him. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest, a defensive shield. "Why would you be in his drawer, Charlie?" He laughed nervously, brushing at his hair, only making more glitter scatter onto the carpet. "Come on, sweetheart, don't make this into something it's not." I was trying to help, but the veneer of his charm was cracking. His words fell flat against the evidence covering his clothes, his hair, his skin. The more he spoke, the guiltier he looked. And still I stayed quiet, letting the silence press against him like a weight he couldn't lift. Lauren pressed again. "What exactly were you hoping to find?" Her voice was lower now, colder. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were snooping through my father's personal things in the middle of the night." Charlie's jaw clenched. He looked at me with eyes that burned with blame, as if daring me to intervene, to throw him a rope. But I simply raised my eyebrows, my expression calm. This wasn't my moment to rescue or condemn, it was his chance to expose himself. He threw his hands up, glitter cascading like damning evidence. "Why are you interrogating me like this? I'm your husband, Lauren. Don't I deserve a little trust?" The word husband sounded hollow empty. Lauren flinched, but she didn't back down. "Trust is earned, Charlie. And right now, I don't recognize the man standing in front of me." His mask slipped further. The warmth drained from his voice, leaving only sharpness. "This is ridiculous. You're choosing him over me. An old man over your own husband." Her eyes hardened. "No," she said, steady as stone. "I'm choosing the truth over lies." In that instant, I knew the scales were tipping. Charlie wasn't just fighting me anymore, he was losing Lauren. "So let me ask you, if you saw your loved one standing in glittering guilt, begging for trust, while every sign screamed betrayal, would you give them another chance? Or would you let them fall under the weight of their own lies?" Charlie's glitter-covered hands clenched into fists at his sides. Every twitch of his jaw screamed desperation, but he forced a weak smile that fooled no one. "Lauren, sweetheart," he pleaded, "you have to believe me. I wasn't snooping. I heard a noise, I thought maybe someone had broken in." Lauren folded her arms tighter, her voice flat. So you decided to break into my father's dresser instead of checking the locks. Charlie stammered, sweat gleaming beneath the glitter that clung to his face. I panicked. I thought maybe he kept something important in there, something that could help. Help with what exactly? I asked quietly. My voice wasn't raised, but it sliced through his excuses like a blade. His eyes flicked to me, then back to Lauren. I was just trying to protect you both. Don't you see? But Lauren wasn't buying it anymore. The disbelief etched into her face had hardened into anger. Protect us, she said, her voice rising. By rifling through my father's belongings in the middle of the night. By lying about why you were up here. Charlie tried to step toward her, his hands outstretched, but she pulled back, disgust flashing across her features as more glitter fell from his sleeves. He looked ridiculous, every movement leaving behind a trail of evidence that no words could erase. I leaned back slightly on the bed, letting the silence hang. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting. It forces the liar to fill the void, to expose more of themselves in their scramble to survive. I know what this looks like. Charlie pressed, his voice cracking. But it's not what you think. I love you, Lauren. I was just trying to figure out how to keep us safe. Lauren shook her head slowly. Safe from what, Charlie? Because from where I'm standing, the only danger in this house is you. His mask shattered then. The fake concern, the smooth charm, it all drained away. What was left was raw panic. He's turning you against me. Charlie spat his finger, jabbing in my direction. That's what this is. He's manipulating you, trying to make me look bad so he can control you. Lauren's face hardened further. No, Charlie. You did that yourself the moment you chose to sneak around like a thief. That was my cue. I reached over to my nightstand, picking up my phone. Lauren, I said gently, there's something you need to hear. Something I recorded 2 nights ago. Charlie's head snapped toward me, his face draining of color beneath the glitter. Don't, he hissed. Don't you dare. But Lauren's eyes widened. She turned back to me, her voice steady. Play it, Dad. I tapped the screen, and Charlie's own voice filled the room, clear as day. Yeah, it's me. Everyone's asleep. The old man's definitely loaded. I found bank statements, investment portfolios. Serious money here. The sound cut through the room like thunder. Lauren's hand flew to her mouth as she stared at her husband. The lies were crumbling, piece by piece. So let me ask you, if you heard your partner's secret words, condemning them in their own voice, would you give them room to explain, or would you let their betrayal speak for itself? Lauren stood rooted to the floor, her hand still covering her mouth as Charlie's voice echoed from my phone. Each word seemed to chip away at the image she had clung to the husband she thought she knew. Stop it, Charlie snapped, his voice breaking. He lunged forward, but I held the phone higher, my thumb hovering over the screen. Sit down, I said calmly, though steel lined my voice. He froze, his glitter-streaked face trembling with rage. Lauren's eyes were wet now, but they were clear. Play it, Dad. I pressed play again. The recording continued. Tomorrow night, Lauren's going to her book club. She goes every Tuesday, 7 to 9. Perfect timing. I already have the safe key. The old fool keeps everything in there, cash, jewelry, probably more bank information. Lauren gasped, her face draining of color. You planned to rob my father while I was out, she whispered, her voice shaking. Charlie raised his hands as if he could physically push her disbelief away. It's not like that, I was desperate. But the phone cut him off with his own words. Look, my gambling debts aren't going away. Those guys aren't patient. This has to happen now. The room went silent except for the rasp of Charlie's breathing. Glitter clung stubbornly to his sweat-damp skin, catching the lamplight with cruel irony. Lauren's hands dropped to her sides. She looked at him as though she were seeing a stranger. "Gambling debts," she said faintly. $47,000. You were going to use me, your wife, as a cover while you stole from my father. Charlie's desperation twisted into anger. "You don't understand, Lauren. I did it for us, for our future. I was protecting you." "Protecting me," she spat. Her tears turned sharp, her voice rising like a whip. "By lying to me, by planning to rob the man who raised me, by calling him a lonely old fool behind his back." Charlie flinched as if struck. His mouth opened, but no excuse came. The lies had run dry. I stopped the recording and let the silence settle like a final verdict. The weight of his betrayal filled the room, and for once Charlie had nothing left to hide behind. Lauren took a slow breath, her shoulders squaring as though some hidden reserve of strength had risen within her. "You've been lying to me for months," she said. "The job loss, the finances, all of it. You dragged us into debt, into danger, and when you saw a way out, you chose betrayal." Charlie's face crumpled. "Lauren, please, no," she cut him off, her voice low but firm. "The man I thought I married is gone. All I see now is someone who would destroy his own family to save himself." In that moment, the scales tipped for good. My daughter's loyalty had shifted, her eyes no longer clouded by love, but sharpened by truth. "So let me ask you, if someone you loved was unmasked in front of you with undeniable proof, would you cling to the memory of who they were or face who they really are?" Lauren's tears had dried into something stronger. She stood straighter now, her jaw tight, her arms crossed as though to shield herself from the man glittering before her. For years she had looked at Charlie with love, with trust, with hope. Now every ounce of that trust turned into a blade she aimed right back at him. "You were going to rob my father," she said, her voice steady but trembling underneath. "You called him names. You thought you could use me as your excuse." Charlie stepped closer, his hands pleading, sending more glitter raining onto the carpet. "Lauren, listen, I didn't mean it. I was under pressure. Those guys, if I don't pay them, it's over for me." "It should be over," she snapped, her eyes flashing. "Because the man I thought I married would rather come clean than drag me into your mess. The man I thought I married would never look at my father like a target. He looked at her like a cornered animal, his desperation curdling into anger. Don't do this. You're my wife. We swore vows. You're supposed to stand by me." Lauren shook her head, her voice low but sharp. "And you broke those vows the moment you decided to rob the man who welcomed you into his home. You don't get to demand loyalty when you've already betrayed it." I sat quietly on the bed, watching her take her stand. Pride swelled in my chest, pride I hadn't felt in months. She was no longer the daughter blinded by love, she was the woman who had found her strength. Charlie tried one last gambit, his eyes narrowing at me. "This is your fault, old man. You turned her against me. You've been poisoning her since the day we moved in." Lauren turned on him so quickly his words died in his throat. "No, Charlie. You did that. When you lied about the job, when you lied about the bills, when you lied about every single night you disappeared into another room to make your secret phone calls. My father didn't have to poison me. I finally saw you for what you are." He staggered back as though her words had struck him physically. For the first time, the glitter on his face didn't just make him look ridiculous, it made him look exposed, unmasked, a fraud painted in shining colors. Lauren took a deep breath, her voice trembling but resolute. "Pack your things. Tonight." Charlie's eyes widened, his bravado collapsing. "Lauren, don't get out," she said, her voice breaking into steel. "You're not welcome in this house anymore, not in my life. Not after this. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Charlie stood there trembling, a man undone not by fists or police, but by his own greed, his own arrogance, his own betrayal. I watched my daughter, her shoulders squared, her gaze unwavering. She wasn't just defending me, she was reclaiming herself. So let me ask you, if someone you love betrays not just you, but your family, would you give them a second chance? Or would you cut them out before they drag you down with them? Charlie stood in the middle of my bedroom, a man covered in glitter and shame, and for once, he had no words left to spin. His chest rose and fell quickly, his eyes darting between me and Lauren, searching for even the smallest crack in her resolve. But there was none. My daughter's face was set. Her arms folded, her voice steady as stone. "Get your things," she said again, "and get out." The room went still. Charlie opened his mouth, but only a rasp came out. Finally, he swallowed and tried one more desperate ploy. "Half of everything we own is mine. You can't just throw me out like trash. I'll fight this. I'll take what's mine." Lauren's expression didn't waver. "What exactly do we own, Charlie?" "Debt, $47,000 of it to be exact. You can take half of that. Go ahead. Fight for it in court." His bravado collapsed, shoulders sagging. He looked at me, then his eyes filled with hate. "This is your fault," he hissed. "If you'd just given me a little help, none of this would have happened." I leaned forward slightly, my hands clasped. "No, Charlie. You had help the moment Lauren brought you into my home. You had a roof, a bed, and a family. What you chose was betrayal. Don't blame me for your greed." The words hit him harder than any shout could have. His lips tightened, but no retort came. He knew the truth when he heard it. Lauren turned toward the door, her voice final. "Leave your key on the kitchen counter, and don't contact me. My lawyer will handle the rest." Charlie stood there for a long moment, the weight of the glitter and the recording pressing him into silence. Then, with a defeated shake of his head, he stormed toward the guest room. We could hear him stuffing clothes into a bag, the zipper of his suitcase shrieking through the quiet house. Every slam of a drawer was another note in his symphony of failure. When he reappeared in the doorway dragging 2 bags, he still shimmered in silver and gold, looking less like a man and more like a ruined spectacle. Lauren didn't even look at him. She simply pointed toward the stairs. "Go." For once, Charlie obeyed. He stomped down the steps, each heavy footfall scattering more glitter into the carpet. A minute later, the front door slammed, and the sound of his car starting broke the silence. Then he was gone, swallowed by the night. Lauren sank into the chair by my bed, her shoulders trembling, tears finally spilling free. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I brought him here. I put you in danger." I reached over, resting my hand gently on hers. "Sweetheart, you couldn't have known. He fooled you. He tried to fool me. But the truth always shows." She nodded through her tears, managing a small, broken smile. In that moment, it wasn't just a daughter choosing her father. It was a woman choosing integrity over illusion. So let me ask you, if you were in Lauren's place, would you cling to a marriage built on lies? Or would you walk away and stand with the person who has always protected you? For a few blessed days after Charlie left the house, finally felt like mine again. The air was lighter, the silence restful rather than tense. Lauren stayed moving back into her old room, and for the first time in weeks, I could drink my morning coffee without wondering who might be listening at the vent. But peace doesn't last long when a desperate man still has debts snapping at his heels. The first sign came in the form of a thick envelope slid under my front door one evening. Inside was a letter on cheap legal stationery full of empty threats. "I will fight for half of all marital property. I will expose the manipulation your father has inflicted on you, Lauren. You'll regret this." The words were venomous, but the desperation bled through every line. He didn't want justice, he wanted leverage. Lauren's hands shook as she read it aloud. "He's not finished," she whispered. "He's going to drag us both into court." I took the letter and set it on the table, my face calm. "That's fine," I said. "Courtrooms deal in evidence, and evidence is what I have." Still, Charlie didn't stop at letters. He started calling, leaving messages on Lauren's phone at all hours. His voice shifted between begging and threatening. "Give me another chance. You'll be sorry. I'll ruin him." Lauren stopped answering, but I made her save every voicemail. Each one was another nail in the coffin he was building for himself. Then came the night when he drove past the house, his car crawling slow along the curb. Lauren spotted him from the upstairs window, her breath catching. "Dad, he's watching us." I pulled the curtain closed and set my jaw. Good. Let him watch. Let him see that fear doesn't live here anymore. What Charlie didn't realize was that every step he took, I was one step ahead. The cameras I'd installed were still active, and I'd upgraded the system. Now, every time his headlights swept across my driveway, the motion sensors triggered recordings with timestamps. His pattern of intimidation was being captured in full color. Lauren sat across from me at the kitchen table one night, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "What if he really tries to take this to court, Dad? What if he twists everything and makes me look blind or worse, complicit?" I reached over and touched her hand gently. "Sweetheart, truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs patience. He's already confessed on tape, humiliated himself in front of both of us, and left a trail of threats. All we have to do is keep steady and let him reveal himself again." She nodded slowly, the steel returning to her spine. For the first time, she was no longer the daughter caught between husband and father. She was my ally. "So let me ask you, if someone tried to fight you in court with nothing but lies, would you meet them head-on with truth? Or would you let their own actions bury them deeper?" Charlie didn't take silence well. The more Lauren ignored his calls, the louder his threats became. He left voicemails that shifted like quicksand one minute, promising to change the next, swearing revenge. I listened to every word, saving each recording, building the archive of his downfall. What he didn't understand was that every threat was a gift, another piece of evidence to lock away safely. Then came the letter from his so-called attorney. It was full of bluster, demanding spousal support, claiming Lauren had been coerced by her manipulative father. The irony made me laugh out loud. If manipulation was an Olympic sport, Charlie would have taken gold. Lauren sat at the table with the letter trembling in her hands, her eyes filling with tears. "He's trying to paint you as the villain," she said quietly. I reached across the table, steadying her hand. "Sweetheart, I spent 30 years investigating fraud. Men like him always overplay their hand. Let him." Still, I knew it wasn't just about paper threats anymore. A man with $47,000 in gambling debt doesn't play fair when cornered. He'd already prowled past the house once. I had no doubt he'd try again, either to intimidate us or to find another angle of attack. So I upgraded my defenses. I called a friend from my old insurance days, a man who now worked private security. He came by one afternoon, installed additional cameras outside, and showed me how to link them all to cloud storage. "If he so much as sets foot on the property, you'll have it on record," he promised. That night around midnight, my phone buzzed. The alert showed headlights sweeping across my driveway. Charlie's car again. Only this time he stopped. He got out, pacing the sidewalk, staring up at the windows like a man looking for cracks. The camera caught every step, every glance, even the cigarette he lit nervously before driving off again. The next morning, Lauren sat beside me as I replayed the footage. She shook her head, disgust mixing with fear. "He looks like a stranger, Dad, like someone I never even knew." I put an arm around her shoulders. "That's because desperation strips men bare. This is who he's been all along. We just finally see it." But I wasn't going to wait for him to grow bolder. I compiled everything: the recording of his midnight phone call, the footage of him prowling outside, the glitter-covered humiliation caught in crisp night vision. I organized the voicemails, time-stamped the drive-bys, and placed everything in a folder labeled simply Charlie, Evidence. If he wanted a fight in court, he would get one, but not the way he imagined. Because this wasn't just about money or property anymore. This was about protecting my daughter from a man who thought lies could outweigh truth. And in my house, truth was about to roar louder than he could ever whisper. So let me ask you, if someone threatened to ruin you with lies, would you lash out in anger, or would you calmly stack every piece of truth until it crushed them under its weight? The knock came on a Thursday morning, sharp and insistent. When I opened the door, a man in a wrinkled suit handed me an envelope. "You've been served," he muttered before walking away. Inside was the paperwork Charlie had filed for spousal support and division of marital property, claiming Lauren had been influenced by her controlling father and left him destitute. Lauren read the words in disbelief. "He's actually doing it," she whispered. "He's dragging us into court." I nodded calmly. "Of course he is. A drowning man will cling to anything, even if it drags him deeper." But Charlie hadn't stopped there. That evening, one of my neighbors, Mrs. Henderson, came by looking unsettled. "David," she said gently, "I don't know how to tell you this, but Charlie's been talking around town, saying you're unstable, that you're losing your memory." Lauren's eyes widened in fury. "He's trying to make Dad look senile so no one will believe him." I felt the anger rise, but I forced myself to stay steady. "Good," I said. "Let him spread lies. When the truth comes out, he'll look even smaller." Still, the escalation was clear. Charlie wasn't just playing for money, now he was trying to destroy reputations, to poison the well before the case even began. But what he didn't know was that while he whispered lies, I held his voice on tape, his face on camera, his threats in writing. That night, I opened the folder on my desk, labeled Charlie. Evidence. Inside was everything: the recording of him plotting to rob me, the glitter-soaked video of his humiliation, the voicemails where he threatened Lauren, the footage of him prowling outside the house. Each piece alone was damning. Together, they were a hammer waiting to fall. Lauren stood beside me, her face pale but determined. "Dad, what if he twists everything in court? What if they believe him?" I turned to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, truth doesn't need to twist. It stands. And when it stands, lies fall." I spent the next hours assembling the evidence into a clean, organized package. Transcripts of his calls, screenshots of the camera feeds, copies of every voicemail, even the legal threats he'd sent us. Each document, each file was another step toward ending this once and for all. As I worked, I couldn't help but think of Charlie's arrogance, how he had laughed about using Lauren as his alibi, how he had dismissed me as some old fool. He believed I would crumble. Instead, I was sharpening the blade of truth. By midnight, the binder was finished. On the cover, I wrote only 2 words: "Final blow." So let me ask you, if someone smeared your name and painted you as weak, would you waste energy fighting rumor with rumor, or would you stand back? Let the lies pile up and then crush them with undeniable proof. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and old paper, the kind of smell that carries both authority and history. Lauren and I sat side by side at the petitioner's table, our lawyer, a calm, seasoned woman named Margaret, arranging files neatly before her. Across the aisle sat Charlie, looking worn, but still trying to project confidence. His suit was a size too big, his tie crooked, and though the glitter was long gone, I couldn't help but remember him standing in my bedroom, sparkling like a fallen star. The judge entered stern and efficient. We're here today to address Mr. Charles Bennett's petition for spousal support and division of property. His voice was clipped businesslike. Charlie rose, puffing his chest. Your Honor, my wife left me under the manipulation of her father. I've been denied access to our shared assets. I've been left destitute through no fault of my own. He spoke like a man rehearsing a script, throwing glances at Lauren as though daring her to flinch. Margaret rose smoothly. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Bennett has not only been dishonest about his financial situation, but that he has engaged in actions that jeopardize my client's safety and her father's property. Charlie scoffed loudly. What evidence more lies fed to you by that old man? Margaret didn't respond to the jab. Instead, she clicked her pen, signaling me. I opened the binder I had prepared, the one labeled Final Blow. The first piece was a transcript, but Margaret didn't bother with words on paper. She pulled out a small recorder and pressed play. Charlie's voice filled the courtroom, cold and undeniable. Yeah, it's me. Everyone's asleep. The old man's definitely loaded. I found bank statements, investment portfolios, the whole thing. Tomorrow night, Lauren's going to her book club. Gives us perfect timing. The sound echoed through the silent room. Charlie's face drained of color. That's taken out of context, he blurted, but the judge held up a hand for silence. Margaret clicked to the next track, his admission of gambling debts. Those guys aren't exactly patient, if you know what I mean. This has to happen now. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. Mr. Bennett, are you admitting to owing gambling debts? Charlie shifted in his seat, stammering, I was just exaggerating. That was private conversation, but the blows kept coming. Margaret displayed still images from the security footage, Charlie sneaking into my bedroom at 2:43 a.m., then stumbling back, covered head to toe in glitter. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Lauren sat rigid beside me, her face pale but resolute. She didn't even look at Charlie. She looked at the judge, calm and steady, the way someone does when the truth has already spoken, louder than any plea. The judge cleared his throat. I've seen enough for today. Mr. Bennett, these are serious allegations backed by your own words and actions. I strongly advise you to consider withdrawing your petition before we proceed further. So let me ask you, if you were standing in that courtroom, watching your betrayer unravel in front of a judge, would you feel relief or would you feel sorrow for how far they had fallen? Charlie's bravado drained away under the judge's gaze. For a moment he tried to speak, his lips moving, but no sound coming out. Then, with a defeated slump of his shoulders, he muttered, Fine. I withdraw the petition. His voice was so small it barely carried past the bench. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Bennett, this court does not take lightly to individuals who waste its time or who attempt to use it as a tool for deceit. You've been spared today only because the opposing side showed restraint. Consider this a warning. If further evidence arises, the consequences will be severe. Margaret nodded respectfully. Thank you, Your Honor. My clients have nothing further. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. Just like that, Charlie's last gambit crumbled into dust. As the courtroom emptied, Lauren and I sat for a moment longer. She looked down at her hands, twisting them together nervously, then turned to me. Dad, it's really over, isn't it? I placed my hand over hers, firm and steady. Yes, sweetheart, it's over. He can't touch us anymore. We stood together walking out as Charlie lingered in the back, his lawyer whispering angrily at him. He didn't follow us. He couldn't. He looked like a man already exiled from his own life. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp and cool. Lauren drew a deep breath as though tasting freedom for the first time in months. I feel lighter, she said softly, like I've been carrying something heavy without knowing it. I smiled faintly. That's because the truth always lightens the load once it's finally out in the open. In the weeks that followed, Charlie faded from our lives like a bad dream. His calls stopped. The car stopped circling our street. Word spread quickly that he'd skipped town, likely running from the same men he'd tried to rob us for. Lauren filed for divorce, and with the evidence in hand, the process was swift and uncontested. Life slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. I brewed coffee in the mornings. Lauren started her new job at the library, a place where her love of books was finally more than a hobby. She came home in the evenings with stories of children's laughter and neighbors' gratitude instead of tears and excuses. One night, as we sat in the living room together, she looked over at me and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for not only protecting me, but for letting me see the truth for myself. If you had forced it on me earlier, I might not have believed it." I reached over, squeezing her hand gently. Sometimes, sweetheart, the hardest truths are the ones we need to see with our own eyes. All I did was make sure you couldn't miss it. The glitter had long been vacuumed from my carpet, but in a way it had left a mark that couldn't be erased. It reminded us both that justice sometimes arrives not with anger, but with patience and a little sparkle. So let me ask you, if you had to choose between exposing a betrayer slowly with undeniable proof, or cutting them out immediately, which path would you take? Looking back, I realize this story was never just about money or a safe hidden in a bedroom. It was about dignity, trust, and the choices we make when betrayal knocks on the door dressed as family. My son-in-law thought he could reduce me to a stereotype, an old man too tired to notice, too weak to fight back. But he forgot something important. Age doesn't erase wisdom, it sharpens it. Lauren learned that love cannot excuse lies, and I learned that patience can be sharper than anger. By letting Charlie reveal his own nature, we uncovered the truth in a way that no excuse could cover. The cameras, the recording, even the glitter, all of it wasn't just proof. It was a mirror forcing him to face the man he had become. To those listening, maybe you've faced betrayal too, whether from family, friends, or someone you trusted with your whole heart. The lesson I carry is this: never underestimate yourself, and never allow someone's lies to define who you are. Justice may not always come quickly, but it comes when you hold steady to the truth. Have you ever faced a betrayal like mine? How did you handle it? What lesson did it leave behind for you? Share your story in the comments. If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share it. Justice, after all, shines brightest when it's seen together. Thank you for listening.